Yo, this is Mike Bland. Welcome to the Leadership Fellowship Podcast, where you have to be qualified to have a conversation. Let's go. Welcome to this episode of the Leadership Fellowship Podcast, where you have to be qualified to have a conversation. Today's topic is about Black fatherhood, and we have our first guest. Excited to welcome Anthony Smith to our podcast. Anthony Smith is the Vice President of Financial Wellness with the Prudential Group. He's a graduate of Rutgers University, class of 1985, Long Branch High School, lifelong Long Branch resident. He's also the unique co-founder of the Community Balance Foundation, which we'll get into today and what they do. He's a proud father of 4. I like to say I'm the bonus child, so that's 5, proud child of 5. And he also serves on the Long Branch Planning Board. Anthony is an intricate member of the fabric of the Long Branch community, so I'm excited to have him here and let him tell you a little bit more about yourself. So welcome, man. You're our first guest, man. We're excited, man. Excited for you to have you.
Hey, Mike, and I feel honored to be your first guest. And I'm glad you said you ended with father of 5. Yeah, I was going to say 4 plus 1, father of 5, whatever the case may be. Happy to be here, ready to have this conversation. I think is important. Black fatherhood, we can talk about a number of different things that stems from Black fatherhood. As you mentioned, at this time, I'm vice president at Prudential, graduate of Long Branch, son of a single mom. And so all of that kind of ties together as far as when you're talking about Black fatherhood, when we're talking about a number of the topics, because it wasn't easy getting here. And just looking forward to having an engaging conversation.
Absolutely, like you said, I'm the bonus child, so just let everybody know I look up to this. I look up to this man, just like so many of our friends, so many other people in our community. So buckle up. This is getting ready to be an exciting conversation, an educational, influential conversation. So let's get ready to do it. So let's get ready to jump right in, man. Tell us a little bit more about you being the VP at Prudential Financial Wellness. That's huge, man. You know,
Definitely. I mean, I'm honored to have gotten there. It hasn't been easy, and we'll talk more about that later on. But financial wellness, why it's so important to me is it's about access to education around finance, financial literacy, access to solutions and products to help people gain that financial independence. And who in this country needs it more than those that are underserved, people of color, Black people. And so what people at Prudential may not understand about it is this is very near and dear to my heart.
Right.
It is. I have a passion for it because I believe that only through financial equity, will there really be equity? Only through financial power can we get to that equity.
Right.
So having that opportunity to not only bring product but actually teach and help people understand. I always say to my co-workers at my job, I say, if you give people the opportunity, they'll take it.
That's right.
Oftentimes brown people, Black people weren't considered the customer that they were looking for,
right.
that target audience. And that was because we've never had access to that education. So, and me, Mike, if I know something, I'm going to share it. And so,
that's right.
I try to tell them when it comes to financial wellness, I'm getting ready to try to take it across, the country and let everybody know about it.
Right. So you've done that, right? You've done that. You've poured that on to me, right? And so I'll be honest. And look, this is an honest space for us. We got to be honest with our viewers, right? I was a person, we were just talking about, I used to have screwed up credit, right? I used to have, my money used to be all over the place, right? I used to have gig jobs, right? I used to be, well, not necessarily gig jobs, but I was in positions where I'd have a lot of money and then I wouldn't have a lot of money. And then so I think like the impact that you've made on me financially, like, thinking different, how do you pay yourself first, take 50% off the top, then you pay your bills. And sometimes you got to say, well, we just don't have it. You got to tighten the belt a little bit. But something unique that I think our viewers need to know, like talk about some of the, because you tell me, and I think it's cool. And it's funny because oftentimes when we're sitting on your back deck or we're somewhere, we like to trade some of our good stories on the road. Tell our viewers, man, about some of the people you've worked with.
Okay, well, and first let me start. So when you said that you had problem with credit, that wasn't your fault. Because I don't know who taught you, right? Who taught you the value of credit? So as a Black young man, your goal was to feel like you could fit in. Mm-hmm. And so what does that mean? So often in not only a Black young man, the Black community, because of the fact that we've been underserved for so long, the fact that the positions that we're in,
Right.
we feel that buying clothes, looking a certain way is going to get us that respect that we're looking for. But
Right.
at the end of the day, you know, clothes, they go out of style. It's about that dollar that lasts long. So, you know, I've had the opportunity. I mean, Prudential has been good to me. Well, in ways of, you know, it's funny. Woman, we were talking about vacation. And truth be told, first vacation I've ever been on was when I worked with Prudential, and that was going through a leaders conference.
Right.
So I mean, there's a lot that we can go into around about that, but it's given me the opportunity. Prudential sponsors a number of different different organization events, and so I've had the opportunity to be at, you know, the Black American Film Festival. Had the opportunity to work with Dr. Buster Sores, and so many of you know him.
D-Free.
I think he's D-Free. He's an amazing.
We got to get Buster on, man. You got to tell us again. You got. How do we get Buster on? We got to get Buster on.
You know, I'll tell you this: if you can get him on, it'll be something that's going to he's going to speak to an audience and get them to actually start to think about taking action. That's the one thing I like about Dr. Sores. You could have all the education in the world, so I can tell you what you need to do,
right.
But until you act, it means nothing. Dr. Sores knows how to make folks act, and so looking forward to Prudential. We're working with Dr. Sores at this time, and looking forward to working closer with him to truly make an impact in the Black community.
So again, we're talking about Black fatherhood, but one of the things in Black fatherhood is like each one teach one. So you know, I was raised by my stepfather, and then as a man, you know, he moved on, did his own thing, and so I married your daughter, your great daughter, and you know, naturally you became my father. You taught me about things. So you've given me a plethora of advice. So why don't you let our folks, right? What's the one thing you can tell folks, like one thing you need to know about financial wellness? What's the one piece that you got to do to set yourself up? You know, regardless of what you make, what's the first step?
Get out of debt, and I attribute that to Dr. Sores. I mean, you can't get to first base until you get out of debt.
Right.
And then once you get out of debt, and you mentioned your credit, right?
Right.
Credit is huge in America, right? It determines what you can purchase, the house you can purchase. It even determines whether you can get a rent an apartment.
House. Yeah.
Right. So get out of debt, and that's the first step. And understand this, you know, you don't need 2 or 3 pairs of sneakers.
That's
Use
right.
that one pair of sneakers. You know, there are a number of different communities. They're not buying all the clothes. I remember when I was in the 7th grade, the richest kid in our school, or one of the richest kids in our school, he had 2 or 3 pairs of jeans. and here I was, my family probably made probably 1% of what his family had, right? But here I am talking about clothes because, of course, I had the clothes, but we didn't have the money.
Right.
He had the money, but he didn't have the clothes.
Right.
So getting out of debt, just that's the start. Understanding that what we wear, what's on our backs, doesn't define us.
Right.
You know, how we look as far as impressing someone with a car or whatever the case may be. If it's putting you in debt, it's not helping you. Right. So we have to understand that it's what's up here that defines us.
That's right.
And then you work that way. You know, you work from that angle. You make sure you're not in debt. You make sure you get good credit. And then you start building that financial house. And then you can start building that generational wealth, which is very important in the Black community, because at this time, there's very few of us that have that generational wealth.
Right. And so and we're going to pivot a little bit, but I think one of the things that if you could share with folks, right? So we do better now, right? And so our viewers, don't mistake activity for achievement, right? Don't get it twisted. I've had jobs where I've made 20 grand, I've made 30 grand, right? You've made it from the bottom of your company. Now you're at the top, right? VP of a Fortune 400, right?
Fortune 50, I believe.
Fortune 50.
Fortune 50.
Right.
Yes,
Company.
Fortune 100, Fortune 50, yes.
Right. And so one of the things, let's hit that, because talk about investments that you should make on behalf of your kids, because we know that old adage, that old joke, right? People used to take out home loans or cell phones in their kids' names, man. To screw their kids up, take credit cards. Kids like, why am I coming out of college with a 500 credit score, right? So what can you do to help your child? Like, I know one thing that you do for your children, or for one of your, if I think a couple of your children, but for one of your children, but if you have a little change, what can you do to help your child? Your youngest child is 9, right? Austin, right? Youngest child is 9. How is Austin set up now when he doesn't even know it?
So let's start talking about, let's get away from me, because I've had the opportunity to get to a certain part, and I will say this, I'm not a financial planner, so I'm not giving financial advice. But
Right.
what I would say is something that folks don't think about as much as they should, and that's life insurance, right? Life insurance is a vehicle that can do a number of things. Number one, we're talking about your children. Many times, or your children, your spouse, we leave our loved ones in debt.
Right.
We talking about buying a house, right? You don't have any life insurance. You pass away. That's one part of the income that's gone.
Right.
And now your wife has to take up the part that's missing. You have to worry about college for kids. So life insurance is that's the start. Get out of debt, get life insurance. And understand which life insurance policies that you that works best for you.
Right.
I'll just give you an example. I mean, we are so the access that we've had to financial literacy has been so limited. I remember my aunt, and I've just started working with Prudential, so really didn't understand it myself. And so my aunt was on her deathbed, and so we started talking about insurance, and she said she had a whole bunch of AD&D insurance. AD&D insurance is called accidental death and dismemberment. She was on her deathbed. She was about in her 80s, and she was dying of natural causes. That means those policies meant absolutely nothing. So she died. She paid whatever she was paying in those policies and got
basically getting ripped off.
Basically getting ripped off.
Wow.
So as I mentioned, I'm not a financial planner, but it's important to speak to financial planners. I mean, back in the day, people were afraid to speak to financial planners because there was this understanding when you're talking about money, and I'll get into the black situation, black issues with money.
Right.
But when just talking about money, if somebody's talking about working with your money, first thing you're saying, okay, what does he want from me?
Mm-hmm.
But these products are meant to help you. They're protective products such as disability. So if you go out on disability, if you don't have savings, right, what are you going to do? And they say the average American has less than $400 in savings. Wow. So therefore, the average American can go about 2 weeks if they lose their jobs, if that.
Right.
Not be able to pay their
maybe 2 days in some communities in New Jersey, Monmouth County.
Exactly.
Right? I mean,
and then you think about this last stimulus check that was given, right? $1,200. People said, hey, that was gone in what? A month?
A month.
And that was either you pay your rent or you eat, right? So you had to make a choice. So we don't want to put ourselves in that situation, right? So it's important that we understand that being financially literate is important. It's important to understand that when you're talking to a financial planner, and there's so many rules and guidelines in place that they can't be there to sell you an AD&D product like I told you when you don't need. They have to sell you products that make sense for you. So what I would advise is, as I said, I'm not a financial planner, but speak to one.
Right.
It costs nothing to speak to one. So that's what I tell somebody.
Next time when we do our next episode or another episode down the line, we're going to get a couple of you on financial wellness, financial planners, and guess what? They're going to look just like us, right?
Exactly.
That's so important, right?
Yeah, very important. So as I was saying earlier, so the second part of it, as we as black people, we don't trust everybody.
That's right.
Right? I mean, we live we've been raised where everything's been taken from us, right?
That's right.
So what's so dear to us, what gets us from here to there, what's going to get us to the next step as far as an equity perspective is our money.
That's right.
And am I going to just willy-nilly give my money to anybody?
No.
And so you need to have somebody that you trust. So, and that's the whole thing in the black community, the brown community. One of the biggest problems with money is we don't trust. So we have to be able to develop that trust. And oftentimes you need to speak to somebody that understands your background, that looks like you, that comes from whether, you can have that conversation around 20-year-old, whatever the case may be, somebody that understands where you're coming from. So you mentioned, putting a cable bill in somebody else's name.
Right.
You get a banker from, Wells Fargo that may not even know what that's like.
Right.
So how's he going to help you understand how to begin to get financially well?
Can't do that. I just want to take a courtesy break and give a huge shout out to our producer, Mr. Encore, who's done a good job of making this vision, the Leadership Fellowship podcast, come together. So huge shout out to him.
Huge shout out.
Making his vision. And if you haven't checked him out, he's on social media, Mr. Encore. He's got great tracks, great beats. And the guy, he did a 365-day challenge, man. So he made a beat for 365 days. So you talk about committed. So huge shout out to our producer. All right, let's jump right in, man. You were an athlete in high school. We joke around sometimes. You still think you're in good shape. You still think you can maybe hoop a little bit or hike a ball a little bit. But one of the things you did that I applaud, you did something that I've always wanted to do. You started a nonprofit, man. And you started a nonprofit. So you were a co-founder, and I would like to call it the major benefactor to nonprofit, which is the Community Balance Foundation. Tell us a little about that, what you do, where it is, and how people maybe can get involved. But let's dig in that in a little bit.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. And so before I start, I like to say that there's a number of us, right? So often there's that one person who gets a lot of the credit, but there are a lot of folks that are behind the scenes, right? So little start about understanding about the Community Balance Foundation. Before that, we actually started with a AAU program. Right. And there's been a number of AAU programs. Your Uncle Dave started one back in the day.
Yeah, Running Rebels.
Running
I remember that.
Exactly.
Chavez, Tidy, Darnell, Phil Willard. A lot of people say he was the architect of those championship teams, but we won't go there.
We don't have to go there, but it's not easy to tell, right?
Right.
And so when my older son, my third child, was in the 7th grade, he liked playing basketball. He had friends that played basketball. So I thought about, I started thinking about AAU, and at least from my perspective, you have good AAU coaches, but then you have those situations where they're just picking talent, right? They're just getting the best black talent and surrounding them by other kids that may not have as much talent, and creating these great teams, right? Taking them out of their own community. So I thought about two things. I said, one, first and foremost, the kids in my community can't pay for those AAU costs, right? Some of those costs are $300 a month or more. Second thing I thought
my daughter plays soccer, man. Her thing is about almost $2,800 for the year.
Exactly. And we talked about trying to do something like that for the soccer because there's so many kids that don't have access. And the great thing about those programs is that they get kids out of their community. Right. So I thought, let's try to start something within the community. I got only kids from Long Branch, and so I needed a coach. So I asked my friend JJ. We worked on the
John Rogers.
John Rogers. We worked on the football on committee together. We were on the board for the football program in Long Branch. Yeah, Pop Warner going to AYF. So I said, hey JJ, I have these kids. Would you mind coaching them? He said sure. So we got together. And what was important to me is so often I would see when you start up a program in a town like this, the kids are using uniforms that somebody's giving them. Right. To me, I believe if and these are children, so I'm not going to talk about financial wellness. I'm going to talk about how you get instill pride with children. Do you take children to a program, to a tournament where their uniform looks less than the other kids' uniform? That's right. So I said, let's go get some uniforms for these kids. And at that time, I was purchasing everything on my own. So
that's bad financial wellness.
That was bad financial wellness, but it was giving back to the community and hopefully using that opportunity to mentor children. So I called it an investment. An investment's not always about making money.
That's right.
Right? So we get some uniforms, and I didn't have a name for the team. So John Rogers formerly had his JJ Hoops. He did that for years. So I said, we're I remember at Athletes Alley trying to get uniforms, and they're like, what do you want on the uniform? I was like, well, JJ, if you're going to do me that favor, I'm going to call JJ Hoops, right? Right. So we started off with that, but then I thought I wanted to make it a little bit different, right? So one thing is you talking about financial wellness, everything was coming from my pocket. Whether we go to Florida, we took a number of kids, a lot of that was coming out of my pocket. Right. Again, an investment. I wanted the children of Long Branch to see something different. I wanted them to see a black man being able to fund it differently.
Right. So let's do this. I want you to tell us more about that, but we got to take a real quick courtesy break. We'll come back in about 30 seconds.
Sure.
All right, thanks. What's going on? We're right back with the Leadership Fellowship Podcast, where you got to be qualified to have the conversation with our tremendous guest, Mr. Anthony Smith, my father-in-law. So we're going to kick it right back over to him. You said it was important for you guys, or it was important for you to see a black man get involved and do what you need to do. Let's dig deep more into that, because there's this quantitative notion where is it JJ Hoops? Is it community balance? Well, there's JJ Hoops and there's community balance. Let's dig into that, man. Tell us the story.
Okay, so as I said, it was important for me and for the kids in my community, whether it's black or white, to see a black man actually giving back. Very few times when I was growing up, did I see that. There were some really good ones, don't get me wrong. Right. But I think that it's important for children to see that black people can do the same things, right?
That's right.
So we did the basketball thing, JJ Hoops, for a while, but I realized that my goal was to give more. So I did the basketball. Kids wanted to play basketball. I wanted to do the mentoring, right?
Right.
So it was a little bit more than basketball to me. So then we had the opportunity. A friend of mine had a foundation. He had applied for a 501c3 community balance.
Can you tell people the 501c3 is? A lot of people don't know what that is.
501c3 is a nonprofit organization. You're able to get donations. You're able to buy things at a tax advantage. So it was really important because you can raise money. And as I said, going back to financial wellness, I was paying for the JJ Hoops program.
Couldn't even write it off.
Then exactly. So I was doing all that. So there was an opportunity to get with a nonprofit, and Community Balance Foundation. So I said, let's partner with Community Balance Foundation, make a Community Balance Foundation in Long Branch. I'm the president of that. But when I thought about it, I was not only thinking about the opportunity to raise money and not have to spend money on my own, but as any nonprofit, there are dues, or there are costs you have to pay, and one of those costs could be salaries. So I thought maybe if we could get this community balance to, if we can raise enough money, we can start employing people. So my goal was for John Rogers, the coach JJ Hoops. I was hoping to be able to raise enough money so I could pay him a sustainable income so that we can continue to grow the program. So we didn't all have the same ideas. I mean, we all had the same ideas with children and all, but I thought about community balance. It was more important to me to do more than just basketball, and I know it's not just basketball for so many of the leaders in our community, but I wanted to do something as far as mentoring and being able to offer different types of educational programs and just helping the kids understand that, it's not just about sports. Unfortunately, and I'll just be quite honest with you, so often are we defined about our sports, right?
Right. Jay-Z says sports and entertainment. They think we're equal, right?
That's all we are. And we talk about entertainment, right? We talk about back in the day. And it's funny, I just saw a commercial or something on Instagram where they were talking about sports and entertainment because, regardless, we talk about how much Jordan or LeBron makes. Guess what? The owner makes 100 times more than them.
Talk about it.
So I don't want our children, or I didn't want our children to just think we're defined by football, basketball, and unfortunately in Long Branch, that's often the case.
Right.
Great athletes become woulda, coulda, shouldas, and they're walking around the street because no one told them.
Hometown legends,
right? And that's what we can talk about. And no one ever told them that they were more. Right. So and people know in Long Branch I talk about this, right? So I'm not saying anything different negative about sports, but let me tell you something. There's the sports that people play for fun, and there's the sports and they live their life and then there's the sports where it's your whole life. It shouldn't be your whole life. We should be able to work, be able to grow, and play sports and smile, right? But unfortunately at this time, we play sports and somebody else owns us. Right.
And when it's over, it's over.
And when it's over, it's over.
Right.
And and everybody's not LeBron James or Kobe, right?
But you're right. Now, go ahead. You're wrapping up.
So there's a whole bunch of folks that they're in the league for 1 year, 2 years, and then they're gone. And then what's going on with their financial wellness? So what are you going to ask?
So what's so, and we're going to pivot. We're going to jump back and forth to our Black Father's Day because it's so important that people know more about you as a father. Because again, you've been one of the biggest impacts in my life. I think I tell you that all the time. That's just not a drunk conversation. It's like people like to have, right? People get that brown looking and they're like, oh, you everything, not right. We had that conversation. So. What's so crazy is you grew up maybe in like the Magic and the Jordan era, right? And you didn't have, there wasn't too much controversy around race, right? And so now we've got the perfect platform and it's so much about race. Could you imagine Jordan or Magic being in this period? The one thing I appreciate about this brother more than anything is that he's standing up more than any other athlete with the exception of Muhammad Ali or maybe Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Now think of that gap, right? And so you're talking about the 60s now all the way to 2020. So LeBron James is putting Donald Trump on blast. He's putting the Republican Party on blast. He's putting people who aren't voting on blast. And he's been vocal about brother Colin Kaepernick, right? And so being able to appreciate that. So now is this huge culmination of everything between race and coronavirus. And there's, as I said in my last podcast, the pot has finally boiled over. So I just want to touch on a few topics, and we're going to bounce back and forth.
Okay.
Our Democratic candidate is Joe Biden. One, please let me know how you feel about Joe Biden. Two, do you think his vice presidential pick should be a black woman?
So we're all in this day and age of Donald Trump. So,
right. I like to call him Donald Trump.
Okay. So there are folks who love him and there's folks who hate him, right?
I don't know how you can
And
love that man, but sure.
So
sure.
for those of us who don't like him, and why don't we like him? I mean, you know, I've always said to people, I was born a liberal. I'm going to be a liberal. So I have no problem with dealing with conservatives. So you have Democrats, you have Republicans. I have no problem if you're that. But what Donald Trump is he's something different.
Right.
And if folks don't understand the way he is so divisive, if folks don't understand the way he, and especially during this time, and the voices are out there, we're talking about racism, systemic racism. He's a product of it, and he continues to sustain that.
Right. A lot of people don't know his grandfather was in the Ku Klux Klan.
Exactly. So how could he be different?
Right.
Right. So when we talk about Biden, right? Biden, I'll take Biden over Trump.
Okay.
I'll take Biden over Trump.
And you know, I was a big Biden supporter. Side note, let's get a sidebar in here real quick. Who would you wish won the nomination?
So I was looking for a little bit of change.
Okay.
I liked Elizabeth Warren. You know, I liked her, the way she thought about things. She was very methodic. She was very.
She had a plan for everything.
She had a plan for everything. And I'll tell you, I like the young man from Ohio, the mayor.
The mayor of Ohio, not the mayor.
I mean, not Ohio. I'm sorry, of Ann Arbor, of Michigan.
The mayor. You're losing me, the brother of Michigan.
No,
Pete Buttigieg. Yeah, Indiana. Yeah, South Bend.
My bad.
South Bend.
Y'all
caught me on a Freudian slip, man. You caught me slipping.
Yeah. My bad. But I wanted somebody that's going to think. So too often are we so brainwashed. I mean,
right.
Television will tell you this, and a friend used to call it television, right? And we just listen to it, right? So here we have some great candidates, but because they do this, because I can't worry about what's in anybody's life, a personal life. I'm looking for what's best for the country, right?
Right.
And we need people who can think, right? We're so used to, the same old, right? I mean, only in America, or shall I say only in politics, do we pick people that corporate America would be retiring to be our president, right or wrong? I mean, that's the craziest thing in the world.
That's right.
And I'm not trying to go against age, right?
Right.
But what I'm trying to do is connect generations, right? So, as you know me, I said, hey, I like to pass the baton, right?
Okay.
Pass the baton is understanding what's coming next. So
right.
Technology, all these changes, folks like me, I'm used to the way it was before.
So I'm gonna be a little bit confrontational here.
Okay.
Elizabeth Warren used to be a Republican.
Yep.
Pete Buttigieg fired the black police chief.
Right.
And he fired the black fire chief.
Right.
Would that have had any impact on the way you voted if they were all still in the race now?
I would have to look at the bigger picture, Mike. I
Okay.
sincerely have, because sometimes we make statements based on not understanding what the background was, right?
Right.
And being a leader, I mean, we talked about this before. Barack Obama had to represent everybody.
That's right.
He came into the presidency. We as black folks said, all right, finally we're gonna have somebody to
we thought we was getting our 40 acres and a mule back.
Exactly. And so it's very
right.
difficult to determine why people made the decisions they made, right? So I was looking for someone that was a thinker. That was most important to me. I wasn't looking for someone. And they went against the grain, right? So for a little bit, people to just kind of played it close and played it safe.
Right.
But Elizabeth Warren, she went against the grain. And who says that going with the grain is right?
That's
so
true.
I wanted somebody that was going to think and say something different. But unfortunately, we have so many people that are used to being told, used to not thinking, used to letting the media dictate. I'm going to tell you the truth. We knew Joe Biden, or at least I knew Joe Biden was going to be the pick, because from the very beginning, news sources that I was looking at, they were talking about Biden. So television, they're telling us what's going to happen.
Right.
And so that's my position. So now that we have Biden, I'm looking forward to Biden making some, winning and making some changes. But, we have to do our work.
Right.
You always talk about local. You always talk about, being in the street. That's what we have to do, because we cannot rely on anybody to do it for us.
So,
and it hasn't happened this long, and it's not going to happen anytime soon.
That's right. And maybe we'll get into the local landscape. Maybe we won't. But, do you think the vice president should be either a person of color or a woman? Or should it just, let's be frank, should it be a black woman, right? Because black folk delivered the primary for Joe Biden, right? the majority whip Clyburn comes out, endorses Joe Biden 2 days before the South Carolina, or day before the South Carolina primary. The brother won every county. Never had happened in presidential history. Right? So who does he owe that debt to? But beyond that, what do you think? What would encourage, what do you think would get Tyrone off the couch to support Joe Biden as president?
I like the way you put it that way. So what I like, and when I say what I like to see it, not only because I like to see a person of color representing our country so that every child, every person can understand that this is a diverse country. There are other parts to it. There's also the fact that when we were talking about financial wellness and understanding what the issues that people go through. Right. Oftentimes the folks that are running are privileged people. Right, that don't really understand what's going on.
But okay, yeah, right.
So having somebody that kind of understands a lot, because I'm gonna keep it real. As black people, we have to understand everybody's issues.
Right.
I'm gonna tell you whether they.
But why?
So or
but
not.
why do we have to?
Because,
why do we have to subside to the oppressor? Why they know our issues and they don't try to do anything about it? So why do we got to understand everybody else's issues?
So let me make sure you understand what I mean.
Okay.
We've never had our own. Right, so we've had to deal with everybody else's stuff. Okay, right? So right now we're focusing on us. But when was the first time we really focused on us in the way we're doing now? So when I said that,
I would say Reconstruction or civil rights.
Yep, right, and we did a couple of things and they ended that. So after civil rights, it changes, right? So when I said that, I didn't mean that we needed to focus it from based on what we want to do. Right. I'm saying we never were able to focus on ourselves, right? We say racism, they say, nah, it doesn't exist. Right. We say jobs, they say you got a job. We say equity, they say, oh, we have
equality.
Exactly. We have, I'm looking at, within corporate America, there'll be 100 white people and one black person, and they'll say, yeah, look it, there he goes, and you're like, oh, okay, and then oftentimes, equity. So because of the fact that minorities are blacks, people of color, brown, and women, if there's a 50% white women, 50% white men, they'll say it's diverse.
Right.
It still could be that 1% of people of color.
Right.
Right. So when I say that, I said that to say, trust. If you get a black person in, they're not going to. When we say equity, we never say we want more. We said equity, right? So we're going to consider everybody's needs. We've not been privileged. Right, so when you're thinking about,
we never understand just our needs.
We've always, that's what I meant.
The melting pot.
We've always had to understand everybody's needs. So we wouldn't directly jump. We would make sure there's equity, but we wouldn't leave anybody back. Right. So when you're talking about that'd be a great opportunity for a black person, right?
Right.
But again, I'm gonna tell you what. There's also that representation that's important for America. One of the greatest things in the world was, my grandchildren and my child grew up with Obama being the president.
Right.
I'll never forget. I went to a baseball game. Right. Little kid. And as you know, I come in my suit, coming from work, but also making sure children know that black people can wear suits. Black men can wear suits.
Right. That's right.
Little girl said to me, "Are you the president?" I seriously almost cried because guess what? But we never thought Obama would be the president.
That's right.
Right. So the fact that changed that mindset is something that America wants to continue to do, because systemic racism is so difficult that they're having so strong that white folks who thought they were good are finally realizing that they were racist.
Right.
Right. So why would it be important to have to start to change the narrative in
So you're
America?
saying it's important to have a black person as vice president?
I think it would be. I think it'd
a
be
black woman or black man.
Well, I'll keep it like it is. I mean, again, going against Trump, I'll take whoever can beat him. But I think a black woman would be wonderful. Why? Because at the same time, we talked about women, and this fight right here is about racism. It's not about women, but women have their own things, right?
That's right.
And so being able to, kill two birds with one stone would be a wonderful thing and be a start for Americans to understand that you can be just as smart as the next person if you're black. You can be just as smart as the next person if you're a woman. So having someone that people that represent our country that look like the makeup of the country. Right. We have people of color. We have white people. We have women. Why not?
Why not? No, I'm with that, and I think that's a perfect jump to my next question.
And if I could jump in,
and
for those folks, understand that when we make that statement, we mean people who are qualified, because so often that conversation would go back to affirmative action, and the thing would be, okay, there's 50 white folks, right? one black person, and they would say that one black person is there because he's black. No, he's qualified, right? And because there was the 50, and because you would have made 51, we had to say you have to do things a little bit different here. We're going to make you hire that overqualified black person because you wouldn't do it on your own.
Overqualified, right? When a lot of white folks get underqualified. Let's take another 30-second break. We're gonna pay some bills. We're gonna get right back. But man, I'm loving the flow here. Again, huge shout out to Mr. Encore for producing this production. Anthony, man, we're knocking out the park. So we'll be right back. It's good to be back. We are here back at the Leadership Fellowship Podcast, where of course you have to be qualified to have a conversation. We have a tremendous guest with us, Anthony Smith, and we're really digging into the crates here. We got a couple of sets left, but not too much. You know, I don't want to kill anybody's time. And again, thank you so much for joining us. This is great for you jumping in. Let's go back into this conversation because a lot of people don't understand what's going on right now. Right, we're getting a picture. I feel like for the first time, again, since the civil rights era, we're in a place where black folk have position, right? Maybe we got a little bit of power. And so they're calling for a lot of legal changes in the police. I feel like they're missing the mark. I feel like we still, while we got everybody's attention, let's tackle education, let's tackle climate change, let's tackle social justice. But one of the things that's starting to be in the news the other day, or even as recent as this week, is folks are asking to change the name of the army bases that are named after Confederate soldiers. Or Confederate generals and colonels and leadership. They're also saying, now let's take these statues out of the United States Capitol. They're also saying, let's pull these statues down around the country. And I'm with it. I agree with it. But I said, let's go a step further. How would you feel about maybe taking down the statues of these false history majors like Christopher Columbus, right? We give more credit to that joker than the folks who really came and discovered America. Or how about America was never really it was here, so how can you discover it? So long story short, even better, how do you feel? This what I thought was crazy. I like to say the last Southern sport was NASCAR. They said they can no longer fly Confederate flags at NASCAR rallies, at NASCAR events. How you feel about that? Is this something that you think is going to have real impact? Is it going to strike a chord? Or brothers in the South going to feel like they can rise up? Tell me how you feel about that.
So I'm going to answer that a different way.
Okay.
Right? So when I think about that, keep in mind that America, the history is racism.
That's right.
So to say that those statues shouldn't be up there would be saying that the history of America wasn't systemic racism, right?
That's right.
So when I think about that, I think about where does America want to go, right? And so when you think about it, so do we really want to get to that point where it's all men are created equal? And if that's where America wants to go, then those are the changes that need to be made. But again, you have to understand and respect the fact that America for 400 years was based on racism.
Right.
We weren't brought to this country to be citizens. We were brought to this country to help people grow wealth.
Be somebody's property.
Yeah, we were property, right?
Right.
So the question isn't. When I think about it, it is not. You can't think of the past and connect it to whether we should get rid, because those folks that we know was based on racism. Those were heroes, right? So what I would ask America is where does the majority want to go? Do we really want to be a country based on equality? And if that's where we want to go, then we want to make sure that we're telling the story correctly, and we're making sure that we're lifting up those who uphold that understanding of equality, as opposed to those who work to make sure that equality didn't exist.
Right. So you know what? I think what's important for you to touch a note here, and I think it goes into this conversation about police brutality. And we know what's going on, right? We know how a lot of people call them to defund the police. Do you think we should defund the police?
Yeah, I wish, because this is where the news comes in, right? Mm-hmm. Because half of us don't understand what defund the police means, right?
Yeah, come on, talk about it.
And that's the problem, because we all want some kind of protection out here, right?
That's right.
And so we don't want to defund the police. The problem with this conversation right here, it's not about policing, right? Because the definition of policing, or what we think is protection, we don't have that going on. Right. So it's not about those good young men and women and older men and women that are police that went there to protect and serve, right?
Right.
It's about the fact that it was built on racism, right?
Right.
And this and so
they used to be slave patrol. That's how the police came out, right? They were slave patrol,
and
right?
so they militarized them, and you can't. It's very difficult to police an area that you're afraid of. You know that from systemic racism that you the system has told you that these people aren't worthy of being protected. So it's even a good police officer will make the wrong decision based on the fact that how we're defined, right?
That's right.
So I don't believe in defunding the police. I believe that we need to make changes in the police department. I don't know why it had to become so militarized, right?
That's right.
I thought when I grew up, and I'll say this because there was a young man that was shot in the back when I was a kid in Long Branch, right?
Died, right?
He died, yes. He was killed, right? And so that conversation was around, should the cop have just thrown his stick? Should the cop shot him in the leg? Whatever the case may be, we need to do better at, and I'm not a police officer, but I'm just coming from my perspective, better training, right? Less militarization, more community, right? Because the truth is, it's just like they used to say, the community raises the child. The community also will help police the community, right?
They sure will.
If the police are in the community, they have a relationship with the community is going to have their back. And so the sad part is I say we have three types of police officers. We have good police officers, we have bad police officers, we have police officers that don't have the courage to speak up. Right? And we need to keep those good police officers and those other police officers that don't have the courage to speak up and get rid of those bad police officers. Just like there's good people and there's bad people.
But why is that acceptable, right? Why is that and that's right.
Right?
Up? Because for me, it's like you're not going to fly with an airline where they say, well, we got good pilots, well, we got okay pilots, and then we got some that sleep on the job, right? Nowhere else in America is that acceptable.
And you're 100% correct. So let me.
So how we fix that?
First of all, let me get it straight. Everybody doesn't have the courage to speak up, whether it's in policing or whether it's anywhere, right?
Right.
I've always had a voice, right? So I have to accept people for who they are. So I said, speak up. Good people that need to understand what their job is, what their role is. Their role is, and we're hearing it now, if you see a bad police officer doing something bad or doing something wrong, you have to step in. You have to jump because now that's a crime,
right?
And you have to serve. You are respecting and you are protecting the law. Right. So if anybody's breaking the law, whether it's a citizen or another police officer, you have to step in.
That's right.
So that whole defunding the police, the problem is it's becoming a us against the police, and that was never the conversation.
That was never the conversation.
We're talking about racism. When you can tackle racism, when you can have these conversations, then we'll start to have police officers that respect, right?
Right.
We go from, the police officers are saying, we know you're good. We know they're a good police officer. Right. But the conversation keeps moving to a different direction. First it was protests, rioting, and they're asking black people, why do we... I see all different people. Ask the psychologist why people start to riot. Right. But I'll tell you what, as I said earlier, looting and rioting, isn't that how the Boston Tea Party started? Isn't that the revolution of America?
That's right.
So we have to stick with racism, and once we start to solve that issue, everything else is going to start to work its way out.
So let's have a common conversation around racism and police, right? And I think this goes hand in hand with each other, and then we'll bounce back to the national platform. But this conversation is about Black fatherhood. So one of the things about Black fatherhood, I had this conversation with Teddy. I had this conversation with my uncle. We briefly had this conversation. And then, I'm pretty sure you had this conversation with Kyle. I'm pretty sure you're not looking forward to having this conversation with Austin. What's the conversation like? The conversation, how you have to prepare your young black man for America when he leaves at the house. Tell me how you start that conversation. How do you prepare yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually to have that conversation? I got to tell him how he needs to pull out the driveway, how he needs to have his hands attended to, he needs to have his seatbelt on, he needs a yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. And his boys don't have to do that, right? You have to go over your friend's house a certain way. You have to speak a certain way. You have to code switch. And almost, and I talked about this on our last podcast, is double conscience. And so for the first time, I'll admit, I had to have that conversation with my daughters. And I always say to my wife, your daughter, I'm almost blessed that I didn't have a son. Because I would not know how to talk. I don't know what kind of man I would be having that conversation with. Would I leave the house angry? Would I want to punch everybody in the face when I leave? Because I got to have this conversation with my child and you don't. But I had to have this first real conversation with my child. We went to the protest, tell them what an agitator was, what to look for, where's the escape route if things get crazy, where do you go, how to go with mom. But besides that, talk to me about, because, more than your own children, you've had the conversation with other young black men in America. So talk to me what the conversation's like, because people want to get educated. And so let's take this first step, or one of the many steps, and say, this is what I have to do. This is what you don't have to do, is have the conversation. Let's talk about the conversation.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, Mike. When you said this is what I have to do, this isn't what you have to do. So we started this conversation around financial wellness, right? Mm-hmm. So the average person wants to raise their child and tell them to do well in school, to understand opportunities that are out there, right? To understand how to use your money to stay out of debt, right? And as I mentioned, we already were behind the 8 ball in that conversation, right? So while folks like me who've had the opportunity to go into corporate America or move a step up from my mother, go to that next level, what your hope is to be able to start to help to create that black wealth, right? But unfortunately, what the bigger conversation is making sure your child stays alive, right? So you're balancing, like, I need to get him ready for corporate America, but at the same time, I need to keep him alive for corporate America, right? So when you ask what's that conversation like, think about yourself. I think about myself, because my grandmother, unfortunately, I was raised by a single mother, and my grandmother was strong in our household or in our family,
right?
And as a young man, you think you're invincible, right?
You
do. So no matter what you have to say, that you think you're invincible.
That's right.
So I have to tell my son, okay, my son wears dreads, and it's a daggone shame that I have to start saying it that way. But what happens, because we are told, all ugly, whatever, right? So the way our hair looks defines us, unfortunately, right? So my son wears dreads, so I got to tell him, you make sure you're on your P's and Q's, right? I got to tell him, when the cops come, you put your hands on the steering wheel.
Right.
Roll
down all your windows.
Roll down all your windows.
Turn your lights on.
Right. He can't even make the mistakes that other young men that aren't his color make, because one mistake and it could be his life.
That's right.
Right. So you have to have that conversation, but even bigger than that, you have to worry until he comes home. I got a 20-year-old son, and I don't get sleep until the ring.
Right. Dun, dun. Right, because you got the ring, right? You got long.
Not until the ring comes on, right?
That's crazy.
So that's tough, right? So when people, and it was funny because a good friend of mine who's a white gentleman at Prudential, he called me after while all this is going on. He said, I don't even have to tell my son. That's never a conversation I'm ever going to have.
Right.
And how many of us have been with our white friends when we were younger, right? Because this is instilled in us. And they pull off on the street, some dark alley, and we're like, oh, we got to get out of here.
Right.
They're very comfortable because they've never been, harassed by the police.
Right.
Yeah. But however, we're not that comfortable. And unfortunately, my son, even though he feels like he's invincible, he already had a bad
tell us about
experience
that.
with
Yeah. Tell us about that.
So in Long Branch, so my son, I always taught him, hey, if you're not in trouble, you don't run, you don't do anything. So there was a kid who was about a foot shorter than my son.
Right.
He had
Kyle's a big
somebody.
Dude, right? Kyle's about 6'1",
He's about
220, 230, right?
So he's about 16 years old. So, and what's funny about it, so kid not hit somebody. Kyle and his friends were walking. The police came. Because of history with the police, his friends ran. My son continued to walk, right? So the police stopped him. So what's crazy about it, Mike, is I'm driving past, and I wear glass. It was that night. I'm driving down Rockwell Avenue. I see all these cops around a person. I thought it was a man, because I couldn't see. Knowing me, I wanted to stop, but I saw that maybe I shouldn't stop because I didn't want any guns.
Right.
Come to find out later on, about half hour later, I get a knock. I hear a door shut. And it's a cop car. There's a distinct sound.
Right.
It's a very, very heavy door.
Yep.
Next thing you know, a gentleman comes, an officer comes, and he says to me, hey, I just want to let you know there was an incident going on, but your son, he's great. He told us he went to he goes to Randy. He does all this great stuff. And all I'm thinking is, Kyle, what I wanted to give Kyle a lesson of what I taught him. Little did I know that he was only 15 or 16 years old. They cursed at him. They threw him against the cop car. There were about 6 cops around him. They were accused. And he's like, what? I didn't do anything. Right? So being a kid, that's how they treated him. So how do you think he's going to feel? And
for the rest of his life.
For the rest of his life. So I went, the next day after I calmed down, I said, Kyle, what exactly happened? And that's when I learned the story. So I immediately go to the police department, right? I want to talk to these police. I went a couple times, never got an answer. Never got the cop. Matter of fact, the particular cop, I won't say his name, but he's not one that's very community focused in our community.
Right.
I doubt that he ever even gave the information I want to speak to the police, right? Who brought it? Because I want to understand why my son had to be cursed at, why my son had to be thrown on the car when he was telling them, and then why didn't they tell me that when they brought him back to the house talking about how great of a kid, how respectful he is, and how he goes to Randy.
Right.
So how do you think my kid is going to feel? So I got to also tell him that, son, be careful, but every cop isn't so bad. Be careful, but every cop isn't so bad. Right. Be careful to me is going to be resonate the most, right? So for all those cops who are good cops, understand, Kyle's worried about what good cops throwing him against the car. Kyle's worried about good cops cursing him out. Right? So that's it. So being a black father, being a father of black men is a constant worry.
It's different. And being a black father in America, right? Like, one of the things that I would say is we constantly, I feel like we're in this place where we got to explain everything to our children, right? Our girls are brilliant, right? Like, all your children are brilliant. And so one of the things that sparked my interest today was I found out that the gentleman who occupies the White House, I call him 46-1, is doing his first rally. He's doing his first rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where, if you don't know where Tulsa, Oklahoma is, that's where they had Black Wall Street, where they bombed and destroyed, where black Americans basically formed their first Black Wall Street. It was one of the most successful corridors, not just in Black America, in all of America. And he's doing it on June 19th, and that's June 19th is when the slaves found out that they were finally free in Texas, right? When word finally got back to them, which was almost 20 years later, right? Could you imagine? And so I always like to say, my girls, you were born on a holiday. And so finally now it's coming full circle. They understand what Juneteenth is. Do you think that was purposeful? Are you hurt by that? Do you think what is your reaction knowing that, forget COVID, screw COVID, fuck COVID, I'm going to do my rally. And then here's the kicker. He said, I'm going to make everybody sign a waiver when they come in that they can't sue me to come to the rally. Who does that, right? And what kind of leader is that? So I say all that to say, tell me how you feel about him doing his first rally on Juneteenth in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where we know there's nothing there. Yeah, there's nothing there.
So I'm going to start with I'll go first give a person who's optimistic, and I say that because I saw a Facebook post and I saw someone who was optimistic, and the person who was optimistic said, "Well, maybe he's going there because so much is going on, to start to talk about this is where this happened and it's time for equality." I'll start with that. Do I believe that based on all that he's ever said? No, but I have no idea. It hasn't happened. But do I believe that? That person got
to be a Trump supporter.
Yeah, he actually wasn't. But he was being optimistic.
Okay. He was giving him a chance.
He was giving him a chance. So, right? So, if that happens, we will see. But we've not seen that happen yet. Right? We've not seen. So, because of his history, right? His batting average, right? If you're batting 1,000 and you hit all home runs, I'm gonna expect you're gonna hit a home run, right? So let's say he's batting 1,000 with racism, right? I'm expect he's gonna go there because people talk about what he's done as far as prison reform. Okay, but as far as bringing the country together, that might have been something that maybe someone in his circle could say maybe that's not the best idea if we're talking about America.
Right.
Now, if we're talking about that small pocket of America that believes in racism, then you're doing the right thing.
Right.
But if you're going to represent the citizens of America, then maybe let's think about that a little bit more, and let's figure out where would be the best place to start to bring people together.
Right. What? Maybe it could have been New York City. Maybe it could have been LA.
It could have been a lot of places.
But he picked Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Tulsa, Oklahoma, and so I'm glad you brought that up because what's crazy about this whole thing about Tulsa, Oklahoma, is that we were talking about financial freedom, financial. That we actually achieved it there, right?
Right. So we were the model.
Yeah, we were the model. So the question, because we
they had their own stock market.
They had their own stock market. We talk about integration versus segregation, right?
Oh man, here we go.
There are many folks that said segregation was great, and I'm preaching it now. I'm talking about in the past. Why? Because we had to depend on ourselves, and the money stayed in our community. So because of that money staying in our community, we had our own Black Wall Street, and we had our own financial independence,
right?
Creating generational wealth, right. And then what happened, right? What happened, and that was blown up.
We lost it all.
You talked about the Reconstruction period. We have black.
My favorite period in history.
We have black senators who wrote some of the laws that exist today. And unfortunately, Mike, I don't have the history you have, but I know one of the laws is a law that very important today was created by a black senator, right?
Right.
But what happened there after 6 years of Reconstruction?
Gone.
The Ku Klux Klan came and said,
"You ain't running.
You ain't running."
Right? They were jamming up the ballot boxes, everything.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So for all of the folks that want to listen, that want to be good people, understand that we did not create this, right? We did not create this issue with the police.
Right.
We did not create this poverty.
Right.
We did not create the fact that we don't have the same education.
Right.
Look at the books.
Right.
I mentioned my son went to Randy. He had to go. I had the opportunity to pay for a private school.
Right, private school.
Totally
Randy's a private school. Right.
Private school. Totally different.
Right.
5 to 10 kids in the class.
Right.
Go to public school, particularly a public school where a town where there's more lower income folks.
Right.
There's not equity in education. There's 25, 30 kids in a class, right? Trying to teach, right? Trying to teach with books that may not be the best, right? Trying to teach in a way where you're pushing it and trying to teach from a monolithic culture perspective when you have so many different cultures in the class.
Right.
So then you start to wonder, like, why isn't Johnny just as good as Michael?
Right.
Well, Johnny never had a chance. He never had a start.
Right.
As they say, the video where, there was a video, and there's many versions of it, where there was a 100-yard dash, and they said, how many of you grew up when both parents in the house, right? How many of you grew up when your parents had a job in corporate America? How many of you grew up when your parents went to school? Think about this. When my mother was in school, high schools didn't they didn't prepare you to go to college because the purpose wasn't for you to go to college, right? So when you have that much of a head start, and then guess what? The biggest thing is nepotism. And so think about
legacy jobs, or even legacy in colleges, right?
Legacy in colleges. So think about it.
Right.
We're trying to get from here to there. So to get from here to there means we were somewhere behind, right?
Right.
So behind means we were never there. So nepotism can't exist in my community because I'm not there to bring people from here.
Right.
Right. So nepotism is strong in Long Branch, is strong everywhere else. So when we were just looking for people to start to listen. So when we talk, there were a number, and the reason I'm going to bring that up, you talked about the Christopher Columbus. Think about the Native Americans. Think about what Christopher Columbus really came to do, right? We think about slavery. We think about racism. We think about us being here. So if we want to really make America great.
Which it never was.
I won't say again.
Right.
We want
it's
to
never
make
been
America great. We want to really give people human rights.
Right.
Right? Because if we all are human,
right.
we need to start to change that narrative. As a people, as an American citizen, we need to change that narrative to make this place really great, because it is the backbone, the ideology of what this place is supposed to be. democracy, people being able to have a voice, people having rights, that's a wonderful thing.
Right.
But it has to apply to everybody.
Right.
And until it does, even the guy up here is not going to make it.
That's right.
So somehow, people in the same level, whether they're white or black, they're fighting each other, while the top 1 or 0.5% is looking at us, making us fight each other. So if we really want to make it great so that all of us
right.
can actually achieve that American dream, then we have to change that definition of what America really is.
So we're getting ready to end our show. We're getting ready to end our segment, but I would be remiss if I didn't dig deep into this one. And it may sound like a soft question, even a layup question, but I think it's so important to ask. Because it's important to me, right? I'm a young father. I'm raising 2 beautiful daughters. And again, I can't imagine what it's like raising a son. But I think this is something that men across America, men across New Jersey, men across Monmouth County, men across Long Branch, it's like that heart-to-heart that we'd want to know. And I think this is a platform where we could discuss this, or we could have this conversation. This could be one sentence. This could be whatever you got to say. And I want an honest reflection. We're coming up, we're encroaching on Father's Day. We're here on Father's Day. And, a lot of time I come to you for advice about life, about work, trying to buy a house, stock market, whatever it is. And this may be one of the toughest questions for you to answer. But what's the best advice that you can give to another black father?
First of all, you don't have all the answers. I'll start with all fathers or all parents, right? It is you're learning on the job, right?
Right.
So all parents need to understand you're learning on the job. But me particularly, there are very few in my neighborhood black fathers that were in the household, right? So I had to learn and continue to learn what it means to be a father.
Right.
There's no balance, right?
Right.
So as a black father, first and foremost, don't be so hard on yourself. You're going to be there, right? Don't be so hard on yourself. Understand that it's a job that you're learning on the job. As a black father, the problem we have is so many of us who come from single family household, we don't know how to balance our time. Right? A white father goes to work. He feels comfortable going to work, doing what he has to do. He doesn't feel that pressure of, I'm not home. Well, you can't be in 2 places at one time, right?
Right.
So understand, if you're going to be a partner in winning the bread, then you're not going to be able to be there all the time. So the important thing is, first and foremost, love, right? Understand you don't have all the answers. And understand that you can't make up for what somebody else didn't do. You understand what I'm saying?
That's deep. You struck a chord there.
Right. I'm trying to be the father my father wasn't, but I don't know what a father should have been. Right. So to keep it real, this is an experiment for me. I'm still trying to find out if I was a good father. Right. So when my son Austin and I have 4 children out of school, whatever they become, I'm going to say job well done, or I could have learned something different. Right. But going back to your question, don't be so hard on yourself. As long as you're in the house, or sometimes things don't work. I became a father at 18. Again, trying to do what my father didn't do. I tried to make something work that didn't work. Right. But did not mean that just because me and that person couldn't get along together, me and their mother couldn't get along together, that we couldn't raise our children better. Right. I mean, I'm not better, but raise our children together. Right. So the role of a father is a beautiful thing. That's right? Because you are cultivating someone else's life. That's right. Right? So being there is important. Right? Right. And I'll go the work the if I can say one thing, for me, the biggest role of a black father is to make sure that we change the definition of what a black man or a black woman is. Unfortunately, and I'll tell you this, I'm tired of us being known to be tough. Be strong in the books, right? I'm tired of us being known as just athletes. Be strong in the books. Why don't our kids try to be the number one in the class? Right. Look at those cultures that they're making sure their children know what the power of education is. That's right. So let's stop defining that, what a black person is, because sometimes we underdefine ourselves, right? We like to talk about it's a privilege for us to be tough. What does that mean? Tough has never paid any bills, right?
None.
You know,
None.
I say this is funny, but in my town, there's the second holiday, the second biggest holiday after Christmas is hit day in football. What in the world does that got to do with life, right?
That's real.
So
That's real.
let's make sure our kids are prepared, both education wise.
Right.
Let them understand the kings and queens they are. Right? Let them understand what the real history is. In history, I'm not going to call it Black history because we contributed just as much as the next person. So why?
If not more.
If not more. So
Right.
why does it have to be called Black history? It's called history. Let them understand the history of the people that look like them, so that they can grow to be confident, to understand, to love themselves, right? To be strong. And to be willing to make sure that nobody can tell them that they're anything less than who they are. So that's important to me. So make sure that we redefine what Black is.
Right.
You know, Blacks are doctors. You know, the first open heart surgery was from a Black man,
Charles
right?
Drew.
Dr. Charles Drew. Right. Exactly. So let's talk about that. Let's make sports a game. And if we're good at it, so be it.
Right.
But make sure that education comes first. So
that's so important, man. And I think you knocked it out the park. So we open this thing calling you, introducing you as Anthony Smith. As always, as I talk to you, thank you, Pop. Appreciate you joining us.
And thank you for having me, son. I appreciate you. And I'm so proud of everything you're doing. As you said, right? So, and I'm going to just take it a little personal. People tried to define who you were. People told you that you were just a football player, just a track star, and that you couldn't make it. You weren't that smart. Right. Unfortunately, even coaches told you, well, you can do this, but you don't. And guess what? You defy the odds.
Right.
And now you're a national director of an organization that's trying to make real change in America.
Right.
So I'm proud of you, son.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
My
Those
man.
Those are the best words that son could ever hear. Is like, I'm proud of you. And I always say the worst words you can hear is, I'm disappointed in you. And both can be done without saying a cuss word or cussing out our kids. They are both heavy. They are both anchors in a different way. So thank you so much. Again, thank you for joining the Leadership Fellowship podcast, where you have to be qualified to have the conversation. As you can clearly see, Pop is qualified to have this conversation. Do us a favor. If you like what you heard, if you really want to hear more, please reach out to us on Instagram at the Leadership Fellowship Podcast. Also, do us a favor, reach out to the Community Balance Foundation online and give them a donation. They're doing great work in the community. They are real pillars in the community, where their top pillar is education. They have a great mentoring program. They're diving into work in the STEM, which is science, technology, education, and then I forgot the M. And math. And math. I got 3 out of 4, so that's good. But jump in and give them a donation. Google them if you don't know them. What is the website?
CommunityBalanceFoundation.org.
CommunityBalanceFoundation.org. Give them a donation. Folks are doing great work in the community. For us, we're going to call it a wrap. Again, you have to be qualified to have the conversation. Looking forward for you to join us next time. We're out.